I want to thank everyone who's here, everyone who's watching around the world, and everyone who's helped advance the campaign that Raymond described. There's a whole history here between the US and Iran that most people in this country have no idea about, and they need to. It's a history of domination and oppression by US imperialism that's had a profound impact on events, on the lives of the Iranian people, and is shaping developments to this day. Iran used to be known as Persia, an area, a country with a very long, rich history. It's situated right in the heart of the Middle East, which for centuries has been a battleground of different empires because of its location, because of the trade routes that ran through, and most recently, because of oil. For over 100 years now, Iran has been dominated by imperialism. The British were the first to get their claws into the country in the early 1900s. They took control of Iran's oil for a song. They exploited it for their own imperialist interests, not the interest of the nation of Iran or the Iranian people. They reaped 85% of the profits and left most Iranians in dire and bitter poverty. Following World War II in the late 1940s and early 1950s, a mass nationalist movement arose headed by then Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, and it nationalized the Iranian oil industry, took control of it in order to use it to develop Iran's industry and so on and so forth. This was a real threat to the imperialists, and they reacted with fury. The CIA organized a coup backed by the British, which in 1953 violently overthrew Mossadegh, crushed this movement that had arisen, put a fascist monarch, the Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, on the throne, and consolidated the US's hold on this strategically very critical country. The cost of this to the people of Iran was horrific. The imperialists developed Iran's economy for their interests, mainly focused around oil, a small enclave of advanced development in this whole sea of feudalism, traditional small production, and massive poverty. I was in Iran in 1979 and 1980, shortly after the revolution. I went to Kurdistan in a province in the West. It looked like it was in the mid 1800s. I mean, it's very impoverished. Same with the countryside in the south of Iran. Meanwhile, the Shah was spending billions of dollars building a police state in Iran and a very advanced military force, which the US used together with the state of Israel to defend its interests in the Middle East, as well as to confront the Soviet Union. During these 25 years the Shah reigned, thousands and thousands were jailed, tortured, murdered. When I was there, people told me stories of whole families being decimated by the hated secret police trained by the US, the Savak, or stories of parents being tortured in front of their children. The Shah's repression, this repression was largely targeting the progressive forces, the radicals, the communists, the revolutionaries. And this repression, plus the other actions the Shah and the imperialists took, ended up strengthening the theocratic fundamentalist wing of Iran's religious establishment, people like Ayatollah Khomeini. In 1977, as every other US president since '53 had done, Jimmy Carter invited the Shah to the Washington, D.C. in December and toasted him as an island of stability in this volatile region. Weeks later, protests began in Iran that snowballed into a torrent of revolution. The Shah burned 400 people to death at the Rex Theater in Abadan in August. They murdered thousands of people on Black Friday in September. This did not stop the revolution. It fueled the revolution. By December 1978, 10 million Iranians were in the street on one day, the protests of Ashura. That's equivalent to what, 80 million people in this country going out on one day? I got a sense of this when I went to Iran. Walking through Tehran, it was like a wave of revolution had gone through the whole city and left graffiti on every building as high as you could reach, just to give you a sense of the massive character of this revolution. By February 1979, the Shah was gone and his regime was overthrown. This was a revolution that drew in people from all walks of life and many different political forces, including revolutionaries, including different sorts of leftists and so on, who contributed to the defeat of the Shah. But it was Ayatollah Khomeini and the Islamic fundamentalist theocrats that ended up taking power. And they were violent and repressive from the very beginning. One of the very first things they did was issue a declaration that women had to wear the hijab, the scarf, the covering, head covering. And they attacked women who courageously went out and protest. You see women in Afghanistan doing some similar things now against the forced veiling on International Women's Day, March 8, 1979. I was at a protest for press freedom to keep a left magazine, Ayendagan, open in August. And this was violently attacked by the forces of the regime, the Hezbollah. That's where that got its start. With bricks, with rocks, with pipes. People were killed. When I was there the next year, I saw planes provided by the United States firing machine guns on the positions of Kurdish freedom fighters there. This repression is something that's continued to this day. And this is something the other speakers are going to give you a very living sense of. Since 1979, the United States and Iran have sharply clashed. The US encouraged Saddam Hussein to launch an 8-year war against Iran and helped arm and fuel that. There was open consideration of all-out war against Iran under George W. Bush. For decades, the US has sanctioned Iran in various ways, especially in the last decade, causing massive suffering. Sometimes the US tried to bring the Islamic Republic under its wings. At other times, it tried to organize regime change, overthrow the Islamic Republic. For its part, the Islamic Republic fought back in different ways, but also worked with and negotiated with the imperialists, and most fundamentally never broke with global imperialism. They're simply seeking a different place within it. This history has been distorted, lied about, censored, whitewashed, and especially ignored in this country in particular. And it's critical for millions of people to understand it in order to fight for a better world and to stop the crimes that are being carried out. I really encourage people to go to revcom.us, Revolution, the website, where you can find things like the excerpt from Bob Avakian's memoir, From Ike to Mao and Beyond. It's called It's Not Our Embassy. This is a speech Bob Avakian, a great speech Bob Avakian gave in 1979 after the pro-Khomeini students took over the US Embassy. It's not our embassy, he said, boldly and straight out. You can find things like the American Crime series, which has an installment on the 1953 coup I mentioned, one on the 1988 shoot down of Iran Air Flight 260, murdering 260 people, and much more. And right here at Revolution Books is a tremendous resource. There are printouts back in the back that people can get. There's a series of books out there about Iran. You can, you know, and Bob Avakian's memoir that I mentioned is here. Again, this is vital information to show that the United States is not a force for good in the world, and that we need to think about humanity first, not America first. Thank you.